I made the reindeer because the willow trees in the garden needed cutting back, and I decided to try creating life-size deer from the branches. I didn't want to be taught how to weave willow, I just wanted to try and see what happened. I liked how the branch shapes bent and bowed to form muscle and body. When willow is fresh cut, it's wonderfully pliable. So I made 4 deer and they wandered around my terrace. They reminded me of the winter I spent with reindeer herders in Kamchatka. That great white world far away, beyond Siberia, a cold, snowy land with isolated camps of reindeer herders. The easiest way to get around is by deer sled, so I learned to drive with a pair of deer and wondered, how does Santa manage 8 of them? When people need more deer, they catch them from the wild herds. Even Santa comes here when his old deer retire and he needs to buy fresh reindeer. This time he could only afford 4 deer. He hoped to buy 2 big stags and 2 does. He had to bargain hard with the herdsman to round up some deer for him to choose from. But they were too wild for him to train in time for Christmas. The herdsman suggested that he contact me. So Santa arrived at my house and blew his magic dust over my 4 willow deer. Walking round my terrace, the deer noticed an archway leading to a garden. Being curious about it, they set out to explore. They wandered all day and came back to sleep on the terrace. Santa had explained that the next day they'd start training to pull his sleigh and fly. The tallest, most noble stag was chosen to be the lead reindeer. Santa named him Prancer, but in truth he didn't prance much, and Santa hoped the name would help the stag build his confidence and prance more often. Prancer did not like the idea of being the leader. He was the tall, silent type, willing and wanting to be helpful, but not very bright or clever. And he was worried about being a leader as he didn't know the way anywhere. When Santa told him to lead, Prancer stood still. In a panic. Lead where? So Prancer just stood there. Prancer felt foolish, but then frightened because to lead the team he'd have to run fast. Suppose he just ran into a tree. The thought made him stand even stiller. Then he thought of his name Prancer, how Santa believed he could prance, and so he did a little prancing on the spot to show willing. One of the does came over to admire him. He stood tall and strong. His bashful nature made it easy for them to like him. The doe mooned about him. He looked so noble. This doe was called Cupid because she was so lovable. She adored Prancer. The second doe was Comet because she often gazed at the sky. She was nimble and fleet-footed, nearly as fast as the younger stag. She liked the idea of running through the sky, discovering more of the world. The other stag I'd named Rudy, being Little Rudolph. He had a red tinge to his nose. To make the deer feel festive and to make a celebration of their Christmas night of goodwill, Santa wanted them to wear glittering tinsel and shiny gold and silver baubles. At first they were appalled. Whoever had heard of a reindeer wearing tinsel? "Don't I look silly?" they asked each other. But they found they just felt special and rather proud to have been given this role. The decorations made them feel glamorous and otherworldly. It made them believe they could be something special and they could do things they'd never done before. I noticed that even Prancer enjoyed dressing up and felt a bit braver. Santa understood Prancer's lack of confidence and suggested that Rudy have a go as the lead reindeer. Rudy couldn't wait. He urged the other deer to line up ahead of the red sleigh that Santa had made, and he ran to the front and set off at a fast pace, with 4 deer pulling at different speeds, trying to avoid each other's feet. The reins became tangled. The girls wanted to catch up with the stags and run beside them, so they veered to the side, unbalancing the sleigh, and the sacks of presents fell out. The next day, Santa tried the sleigh with 1 pair of deer. Rudy pulled his hardest, but the sleigh wouldn't budge. So Santa linked the 4 deer in pairs, and to his joy, the sleigh slid smoothly forwards, though slowly, round the yard and gardens. Rudy knew he would have to learn to fly. He tried running along and jumping in the air, then rushing back and jumping the other direction, until the other deer started grumbling and told him it wasn't polite to charge around like that, and worse, he might hurt one of them if he ran into them. So he found an empty place and tried again, but it was no good. The younger doe, Comet, was watching him, and she comforted him, saying, "Don't be sad. I know you'll fly, and I'll be there flying along beside you." Her faith in him made him try harder. Santa said he must run faster, then let go of the earth. He said, "You will feel a slight pop in the air as you take flight." Rudy's practice run was along the terrace, turning slightly right onto the deck and leaping skywards. He made some big jumps, leaping as high as he dared, but each time he ended up back on the ground. After a particularly bad day of failing to fly, Rudy felt awful, but he didn't want to give up. Just one more try. Faster and faster still. His hooves thundered along the terrace, but as he was about to make the slight right turn, Comet stepped out into his path. He was going too fast to stop. Comet turned her head and saw him, and he could see the fear in her gentle brown eyes. He thrust his back legs down and pushed off the ground, springing high into the air, over Comet's head, and up again. To show his joy, he flew in a wide circle round the house, then landed messily in a flower bed. The next day, when Rudy was running on the terrace, a neighbour's dog barked. It gave him such a fright that he leapt in the air and felt the pop of air as he disconnected from the land and flew. He didn't go far, just round the town and back towards the terrace. As he came into land, he realised he was going too fast and was going to miss the terrace. He did his best to slow down. He felt himself dive headfirst into the bushes. To the astonished stares of the other deer, he tried to wriggle backwards out of the bushes. Comet came trotting up to make sure he was unhurt. Not knowing how to land was just as bad or worse than not knowing how to take off and fly. They all sighed as Rudy went off alone in despair. Santa said that landing is fine if you get the right balance between speed and line of descent. You just choose an open space for your landing, touch down running and slow down, not go crashing into bushes. Christmas was drawing closer and the deer were worried. They had to get Rudy flying again. The 2 female deer hatched a plan to help Rudy. It was a secret. Rudy and Prancer could see the deers standing with their heads together, but when they asked the does what they were plotting, the does shook their heads and didn't reply. They put their plan into action the next day. Comet began chasing Rudy. "Let's race to the end of the deck." She tossed her head and leapt forward. He took up the challenge, surging after her, his galloping strides pounding the deck. "Can you go even faster?" she cried. Rudy took the lead and went racing along the deck. This time it was Cupid who stepped into his path. She didn't look frightened. She shouted, "Now fly!" He sprang up into flight and soared upwards. To his amazement, Comet was flying along just behind him. She had followed his lead and sprung away from the ground. They flew together. Rudy showed her the hills and streams around the towns. Then they turned to fly home, with some nervousness from Rudy as he lined up for landing. Speed and angle, he muttered. Rudy glanced at Comet, who'd come alongside him, and she gave him a look that said, "Let's do our best." They both slowed their speed and came down evenly onto the terrace, just cantering, not a jarring landing, a gentle reclaim of the earth. Then they stopped, legs trembling with the excitement. Santa was resting on the terrace. He was clapping his hands. "Bravo!" He patted their noses and noticed that Rudy's nose was almost glowing red. So all the deer started to fly, just locally for practice. They flew on their own to gain experience of flight and landings. Ahead would lie the challenge of flying as a team pulling the weight of a sleigh, let alone a sleigh fully laden with presents. On one of his solo flights, Rudy went far north to Santa's home. Santa had asked him to deliver a letter to his wife. His wife was delighted to learn that Santa and the deer were on track to succeed. She already had a huge mound of presents ready for Christmas night. As Rudy left, flying over the northern tundra, he saw the tracks of a deer herd and a grassy valley where they'd stopped last night. Something caught Rudy's eye, and he circled down smoothly onto the grass. The something was a very young deer, a fawn. She struggled pitifully to her feet, and Rudy could see she had an injured leg. She wasn't able to keep up with the herd, and in the chaos of moving, the herd had not noticed she was left behind. Rudy couldn't leave the fawn there alone, so he did the only thing he could think of. He flew south, carrying the fawn on his back, to be healed by Santa. Santa knew just what to do for the injured leg. After examining her, Santa said, "It's lucky. That's a sprain, not broken. You'll just have to sit quietly for a week." The fawn became a favourite with all the deer, and they took it in turns to care for her. Most of all, she loved to sit beside Santa, her eyes shining with adoration for him. The fawn begged Santa to let her be part of the team, although admitting she was homesick for her mother. Santa offered her a deal. "We'll take you back to your mother and the herd so you can grow into a fine, strong doe. And when you're big enough, you can come and see me. I'll be adding more deer to my team as I really need 8 deer to do the job properly. So there's a place waiting for you in the future." It was a sad moment of farewell when the fawn left, flying north again on Rudy's back. They found the herd in a grassy marsh. Rudy landed somewhat clumsily in the mud. The fawn scrambled down and scampered across the grass to join her mother, bleating, "Mama, Mama, I've had such an adventure!" There was much happiness in the herd that the lost fawn had returned. With their heartfelt thanks ringing in his ears, Rudy left and flew home. As he flew, he was chuckling to himself. After all these crazy takeoff and landings, it would be easy to land on rooftops at Christmas. Santa and the other deer were waiting for him, and as a treat, Santa gave them some apples. Final training, pulling the sleigh and flying, took a whole week, and at the end, the deer soared and wove their way across the sky, matching stride for stride. Behind them, the sleigh wobbled a bit, then became steady. Santa laughed. "Ho, ho, ho, this is wonderful. It's my dream come true." Then it was the evening before Christmas. They were ready. I wished the deer good luck and Godspeed. And as daylight faded to dusk, Rudy's nose glowed redder and redder until it shone like a beacon that would guide them through the night sky. "Ready, steady, go!" shouted Santa, and the deer leaped forward, lifting the sleigh and Santa into the star-filled sky.